right, thank you everybody for coming. Keep room and thank you for being remote. Thing.
Looking for,
Yeah. Would like to make that motion?
I move that Michael Towers request to attend today's meeting, the JMRL board remotely due to a personal matter. But travel, I know I didn't. Thought that might have been a typo.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes of the July meeting. No, there. Any corrections, additions, comments?
I move that we accept them as written.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Announcements. You have some announcements.
Yes, we do have some announcements. So I would like to officially thank Kathy Johnson Harris for 8 years of service on the library board. JMRL has gotten a book for each year for Kathy and put a book plate in them that says in honor of Kathy Johnson Harris for years of service, 2016 through 24. Just on a personal level, Kathy is the only board member who has been on this board every moment that I've been director. So Kathy, we're going to miss you greatly. We have a cake for you. Chris, you want to bring it to show to Kathy, and then Chris is going to cut it up and everybody gets a piece of cake if they like. So Lessons Learned and Cherished, The Teacher Who Changed My Life by Deborah Roberts. Virginia's African-American Historical Markers. School Clothes, a collective memoir of Black student witnesses by Jarvis Gibbons. The Bookshop Sisterhood by Michelle Lindo Rice. Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to six. Sankova, a culinary story of resilience and belonging by Eric Edgepong. And Richard Scarry's Busy, Busy Town. So whenever kids come in to get this book, they will think about Kathy. And the only one that was on order is Go Tell It on the Mountain. We need a new copy for Gordon Avenue, and it's on back. So take a look at the cake, Kathy. Oh.
You could take a picture.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy, for your service.
Hey, Kathy, you only have to stay away about a year before you can come back on.
Well, Kathy's already moving on to the Friends of the Library.
Oh, well,
Because you can't get away from us.
yeah, we know that doesn't last long, so then you come back, you know.
This is, I don't know if you're supposed to make a speech.
Yes.
about
I'm
this.
sure you should.
I chose to have the books placed in Gordon Avenue because that's where my 41-year-old daughter learned to love reading. Every Saturday, that's where we would go. And even to this day, she still goes, and that's how she met David. But we didn't know that until I came on the board. It's been a rough 8 years, not with you all. In a lot of ways, you all were my saving grace. I lost my mother, and I didn't do the best job of being on the library board, but my heart has always been in it, for it. And if there's any way that I can promote the library, because I started out at the, Historical Society is where I would go to the library. That was our library, so that's a long story. But thank each of you, and I wish all of you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Krista, you just want to cut some slices, and then we also have a vegan option if anyone.
Oh, that one can be passed.
And on the flip side of that, Tony, I'm happy to announce that the city of Charlottesville has appointed Siri Russell to sit in Kathy's seat on the library board. Siri is an associate dean at the University School of Data Science, and Siri will be starting in September. So you
You
can
know she has some big shoes to fill, right?
Yes. Yes. So we'll look forward to introducing her.
One thing for sure. That's a running joke.
Well, that's good news. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Bye, Mike.
All right.
Bye, Kathy. I'll have to talk to you later on
Okay.
for your service.
Any other announcements? All right. Any public comments?
If anyone online would like to make a public comment, please use the Zoom raise hand function now.
All right, look behind me. Nope, nobody here. Good.
It doesn't look like we have any public comment today, Tony.
Very good. All right. So we have the continuing education portion of our meeting today, and we're pleased to have with us the Bookmobile and Outreach Services Collections Manager, Marianne Louise-Bell.
Thank you.
And I'll just remind the board that we've asked Marion to be here today because the board is going to be reviewing the bookmobile policy as part of the annual 10-year review later this year. So Marion's agreed to come and give a brief overview of services and to answer any questions. And if you stay after the meeting today, Marion will give you a tour of the bookmobile space, which is housed here at the Northside Library in the basement, and the bookmobile itself when it returns from the final stop of the day. Thank you, Marion.
Thank you, everybody, for having me here today, continuing education. Thanks to the board and also our public. I ask that y'all bear with me. Presentations make me a little nervous, and if I start speaking too fast, do tell me to slow down. If I start speaking too much, do tell me to stop. So I would like to start with a brief history of the JMRL Bookmobile. The JMRL Bookmobile was first thought of in 1946, and it was implemented back in 1948. So we're creeping up slowly but surely into 100 years of service. The JMRL Bookmobile is the longest continuously running bookmobile in the state of Virginia. Not the oldest, but the longest with unbroken service, and quite possibly in the nation, but I don't have that as a fact. But it sounds really good. We have done unbroken service since then, including during COVID. And that was, I had just started pretty much 5 weeks into the job. So figuring out how to maintain service and kind of in lockstep with what the building branches were doing, that was kind of like my initiation. I actually came on board in 2020 to bring it from bookmobile into and outreach services. So we expanded from not just having the city and county of Albemarle stops, but to expand with much more community engagement, and also very importantly, expanding services into additional jurisdictions that JMRL already serves via building branches. These are all our current stops. Operational details forward. Right now, the bookmobile has a staff of 3. We have 1 full-time employee, and that is myself. And we have 2 part-time bookmobile specialists at 26 hours and 32 hours. We have a collection of just under 11,000 items, of which we have at any given moment on board 1,500 to 2,000 items. This is a self-rotating collection, meaning items out either from the holds requests incoming from other branches or from onboard browsing by our neighborhood community stop patrons. Generally, the criteria for what gets to go on board is primarily our new items, whether new publications or the newly printed large prints. Large print books usually are published about maybe 3 years after their original standard print publication run. And then we also have items that are of current popular interest or the usual suspects, popular authors, you know, Grisham, Basashi, Macomber, like the big regularly producing popular names. The budgeting costs are traditionally split 80-20 in between Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville, speaking percentages. And the stops reflect this. We have the majority of our stops out in Albemarle County, and then we have the remaining 20% in the city of Charlottesville. Adding Nelson and Louisa through our expansion efforts, they are responsible for the funding for staff hours, and we were able to coordinate service to these 2 new counties, which are about to turn 1-year-old coming now in September at about mid-September. The stops are assessed annually. David and I meet at about April or May. And the criteria we primarily use is door count. And we will revise the stops to see if a stop needs to be extended. Do we need to stay at a location more time? Can we, or should we actually stay not as long as what is scheduled, or should a stop be dropped altogether? And in the instance that were to happen, what are we replacing it with? We don't drop a stop and not replace, just leave it blank for the day or make the drive day shorter. We also consider when we assess requests for community engagement or collaborations with other branches, and we have a criteria as well of when and how. Can you book us? Can we bring the bus? Are we just tabling, or are we going to visit by reserving the JMRL band? With the recent expansion with Nelson and Louisa, we added 16 new stops. That brought us from about 34 stops when I came on board in 2020 to a year ago, we had 35 stops throughout Charlottesville and Albemarle, and now we have 55 stops through Charlottesville, Albemarle, Nelson, and Louisa. 40% increase in stops overall since I came over in as manager. We added one of the part-time positions in fiscal year 23. We had prior to that just a 26-hour. We added the second part-time specialist. At the time it was 20 hours. We have since been able to move it up to have them be 26 hours and 32 hours. And that helps us staff the expansions as the specialists are primarily in charge of the driving and doing the library, professional library service out on the road. We circulated almost 15,000 items in fiscal year 2024, increase of 18.35% over the previous year. We have increased community outreach by 91% since COVID. We went from having, I'm really pleased about that. We went from having a handful of primarily Charlottesville events that traditionally they'd contact us, the Dogwood Festival Parade, the West Haven Commons Community Day, and maybe one or two more throughout the year. Usually within the JMRL system, we go to the central kickoff, and a few years ago we started doing the How To Festival. We have, as I said, increased by 91%. We are doing events. This year is the first year that the Bookmobile went to every single JMRL kickoff. In a couple of occasions, it was actually back-to-back kickoffs. The central kickoff happened right before the north side kickoff. We did both. Crozet happened right before Gordon kickoff. We were able to do both. And it was great fun. The patrons were so very happy to see it. And we were able to advocate more for library service and access. Most popular stops in our new expansion service locations in Louisa, the UVA Healthcare at Science Crossroad, and this is of course in Highway 15, and the Louisa Health and Rehab, which is right in the middle of Louisa Town at the very end of Courthouse Road, where it joins with, I think, Highway 33. These are patrons that have limited access, limited mobility, limited transportation. So to be able to access library services from checkout and more importantly, returns has been possibly vital for their use and enjoyment of, books and resources. And it's actually shown that we were correct in assuming and also assessing. We used a lot of data, a lot of GPS data, et cetera, that yes, there is a very, very significant need at these locations. At Nelson, the Stony Creek Clubhouse at the foot of Wintergreen, that has been very, very popular. Once again, it is a public stop. It is open to the public. It is visible from the road, so we're not tucked in a hard to reach location. And it has ease of parking, ease of access. It allows us to maintain our ADA compliance. And it's been actually really gratifying personally and professionally to see these stops growing as fast as they have, because 1 year worth of data for outreach services, especially in Nelson, very rural locations, that is incredibly fast. It usually takes about 18 months to show consistency of use. And this has happened faster than in my wildest dreams. And I dreamt pretty wild about this expansion services. So it's been really, really cool to see. For future plans, we have increased of passive programming. What is passive programming? Things like the crafting take and makes. You do not need a program leader or moderator. Literally, just take a little bag. It has pretty much everything you need to put together whatever the craft is with the instructions. Right now, we've only been doing seasonal take and makes, the Christmas or the spring or the, something thematic, or if it's an event, for example, the How To Festival this past May happened to fall in International Star Wars Day. So our take and make had to do with Star Wars. We are also trying to develop active programming space, and schedule is a bit of concern, but through my own continuing education, I'm looking at things that can be done on weekends that we don't have like any outside or any other branch events scheduled. I would love to do an escape room through the escape from the bookmobile. There are great programs that I've seen that are story time / play in the park. And it's usually multi-generational. Bookmobile comes out. There is a story time. There is like oversized kind of like board game plays. And then of course the bookmobile is there for patrons to come in, learn about the bookmobile, learn about the library in general, check in, check out, get their library cards if they haven't signed up for one for some unknown, unfashionable reason. Also, another way, the first thing we're trying to do, and we've done it for a couple of what would otherwise be a passive take and make, if you video a tutorial and we've provided it to patrons via QR code, they can just scan it and there's a quick video of, and this is how you do this particular activity. Since you have a moderator, even though it's pre-recorded, then it becomes an active program. So that's kind of like the springboard we're using to develop within the space and time and staff limitations we currently have. We've been able to actually employ our programming budget for this. Increased community engagement. We would love to be everywhere all the time at once. That will not be feasible, but we've been working already in the last couple of years to expand the community engagement. So long as we have adequate heads up, a request, to book us, basically. It takes the logistics, be in a vehicle, have to figure out, can we bring the vehicle? Do you just want a tabling? Who gets to cover this? Can we really make it at all? And we've been taking steps towards being more available to the community. As long as an event is free and open to the public, chances are we are able to bring the bookmobile or bring somebody to represent the library at large, and bookmobile and outreach in particular. We're also developing the JMRL outreach committee. We had our first sending out the feelers meeting in June, beginning of the summer, before we all go headlong into the summer reading program. The primary purpose of this outreach committee is that we want to standardize at least the basic outreach processes and procedures throughout all the branches. So that we can become maybe interchangeable, so that the weight of the outreach is not on just one branch, just one person. So we can support each other. So we can just have kind of like a go kit. Instead of why are we going to a high school? Well, this is the go kit. Are we going to an elementary? Are you going to speak at a senior center? Are you going to go see preschoolers? So have this not necessarily physical kits, but at least already have a checklist of things that you can just like, what are we doing? Go. And I need support. I need a second. I'm going to be the lead. I need a second. And we can just kind of be interchangeable and just be on board with what is the ground floor basics. So we can just, this helps us expand our service if anybody and everybody from any branch that's involved in the outreach, at least we're on the same page of what the basics, and then bit by bit to develop more specialized and more nuanced outreach. Further expansion. I would like to have outreach and bookmobile to all of JMRL. We're almost there, but what will that look like, and what would that need? More staffing, or at least, current staffing, have everybody full-time. So we have the bodies to be present and serve this need. Another vehicle, a fleet of vehicles. I can dream. The current bookmobile, while it's physically not so old, it does have a lot of miles, and it has additionally more miles with what our mechanic called ghost miles, since we use the engine to generate the power for the lights and the computer and the Wi-Fi. This actually adds invisible miles, about 25 to 30 miles per hour of idling. So on the inside, this vehicle is a whole lot older than what its actual chronological age is. It's still kicking, it's still standing. We service it very, very jealously and on time. But it's getting on. If we continue to expand, we are going to need a second vehicle so we could split north and south. So we would have like Louisa and Green, hopefully, Nelson, Albemarle, and Charlottesville. And we can be, like reasonably and realistically serve an area which is basically the size of the state of Delaware. We got most of it right now. Ideally, eventually, and this is, in my wish list, is my Christmas list every year. Each branch would have its own, maybe not as large, but its own bookmobile vehicle. And that would be part of the outreach of centralizing or standardizing the efforts, but then we each have like our specialists. But that's my hope and that's my dream. I think that's all I have. Actually, yes, aside from questions, if there are any questions, otherwise I'll just ramble. Yes.
You mentioned tabling a couple of times. I
Yeah.
think I know what you're talking
Oh.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I fell into using the lingo. It's going to an outreach event and you're just at a table. And you have the literature, you have giveaways. Generally, if bookmobile and outreach assist the other branches, we bring our laptop. Bookmobile staff are all trained in circulation, so we can sign up potential patrons on the stop, and they'll walk away from our table with an activated library card.
So when we expanded to Louisa Nelson, this is we're basically covering the staff costs,
Correct.
not really covering the vehicle costs.
That's correct. So I think that the regional agreement states that bookmobile and outreach services are per contract, so it's not part of the regional agreement that Charlottesville, Albemarle, Green, Louisa signed. It's an individual contract between JMRL and each municipality. So I believe that the next time the regional agreement gets open, this should be revisited and language should be put in to better handle it. Because right now, as Marion explained, Charlottesville and Albemarle stops have always been 80%, 20%, both in terms of the visits and in terms of the costs for them. And when Louisa and Nelson came on board, we only charged for the hours for Friday stops basically that they're making there. And I think what makes more sense long-term is to get all 5 jurisdictions to agree to treat this as a regional service like they do technical services or administration or something. And the cost would be about the same. It would, that flow chart looks about like 80-20 and then down the line there. So that's something to look at for this board.
So I think it's awesome that we have a bookmobile, and that was a great presentation, so thank you. I had a couple questions. One, am I right that you can put a book on hold and have the bookmobile as the pickup location?
That's correct.
Okay, so you can get any book, JMRL.
Anything that circulates in the catalog, you could place holds. If you are not a regular bookmobile patron and we cannot tell from your address, we will contact you. We will ask you which one of our 55 stops you'd like to visit. We only carry the holds on board for that day because most of our space is for the onboard collection.
You'll see it as you pass it.
Kayla Payne actually was able to add into the classic catalog. We're on the drop-down menu for the branch, and then right underneath there is a typable bar. If you chose bookmobile, please indicate which one of our stops, and then that'll print out on our hold slip. If that does not come up because haven't been able to figure out how to do it on the Find It catalog, we will, like I said, we will look it up on Sierra, on our management software, or we will contact either via email or phone, or sometimes both if we can't get a hold either way.
That's awesome. And then my second question was, I was just curious about other services that are offered. So like I'm curious, can people get reference service and get
Yes.
help with finding things that they
Yes.
don't know how to find? And is there like Notary Public? Is that?
We don't have a notary at the moment. That is something that has been in development, and I'm very keen to have whoever's driving should offer this. Other than that, the bookmobile is almost a fully operational building branch. We're just on the road. Reader's advisory, reference questions and assistance with signing up to programs at our building branches. And
Also a moving hotspot.
it is, yes, we are a public hotspot. We do have our secure hotspot to deal with the patron accounts, to handle the patron accounts, but we're also a public hotspot. You don't even need to like sign in. You just see it on your hotspot list and just choose it, and it connects you directly. I do want to add that, of course, due to size and space limitations, there are some things that understandably we cannot offer. We don't have public computers for use. We do have a circulating hotspot that patrons can check out, same as the building branches do.
Space.
No meeting room space, although you're welcome to sit and like browse and read and hang around. We do not carry periodicals because the storing, and also especially the ones, newspapers that happen every day or every week, the processing and the space that would require. But you can place holds on any non-current issue and we will bring it to our next stop.
Do you have another question?
No, that was it.
But,
Let's get Mike.
Yeah,
Mike, I see
please.
your hand is raised. Did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for this presentation. This is great stuff. I will be, my interest was piqued a little bit with the idea of an outreach committee, and I think I'll be interested in kind of hearing more about that, either online or, once it gets rolling. But for now, there's a couple things in my mind that just the term term outreach could mean. And could we just say, just make sure everybody in the room is on the same page, including myself, what do we mean when we use the word outreach?
when it comes to library outreach, and I can see how there's a bit of confusion because in other industries, outreach is like advertisement and PR and whatnot. Library outreach is actually bringing the service out to the community. You will hear a lot the phrase meeting people where they are. And on the one hand, it sounds like a catchphrase, but we're literally doing that. We're going to communities, we're going to rural neighborhoods, we're going to schools to support early literacy efforts. We attempt to go to communities that are underserved in one way or another. Either they have limited access due to distance, difficulties with transportation, physical limitations to access. We also go to communities, for example, here in Charlottesville, that have historically been limited or even denied access. and they're not too comfortable with building branches. Places like this, the goal of library outreach services is that we will lose them as bookmobile patrons one day.
Mike, I think that your GIS work could be of great interest here too. So we're looking forward to your CE sometime this fall. Yes, but I would say that in general, I would say that library outreach is either providing direct library service outside the library buildings or representing the library in the community outside library buildings.
That's a
Thanks.
whole.
So the one piece of that I'll be interested in understanding a little better is just what do we do to identify where there are people in the community who, for whatever reason, don't connect with the library or, see our services as something that's for them or that they use. And I know that it sounds to me like when we're talking about outreach, we're referring to, a physical or a distance barrier that we're solving by bringing services to them. But it seems to me there's another step that you alluded to, and I'm just not curious. I'm curious what, and maybe not for a detailed discussion right now, but down the line, I'm interested in is what's our process for identifying where, this barrier needs to be broken down and how we figure out where to bring this physical service to. So that's really more of a comment than a question right now, but I'm just putting that on the kind of into the conversation package.
Kathy says she has an answer to one of those questions, Mike.
Back in the day, when Mr. Buford, and then I can't remember the other gentleman used to drive, they came to they have a neighborhood, well, they used to. In City Hall, they used to have a neighborhood association presidents meeting to update the presidents of each neighborhood association. My father was the president of Ridge Street, and we had Epitha Village at the end of Ridge, and these were hearing impaired people. And they brought it to asked the presidents if they knew of a need in their community. And my father spoke up and talked about the people, but then other people started coming too. But that's one way to get people involved is a neighborhood association, sororities, fraternities, the Divine Nine. There are also not teachers, school systems that can tell you what areas are being served for free lunch. I don't know if they now keep the books on it, but they used to. And that's another way to determine where you might have some outreach.
With Fry.
That's right. Yeah. I can see him, but I'm at that age where I can see you, but I can't always remember you.
Did you have another question before we went to Mike, Kathy?
The other question was when they used to come to the neighborhood, I'm not going back into history, but if you had a book, if you had gone down to Gordon Avenue and you checked out a book and it was due, you could drop it off. Can you still do that?
Absolutely. The same way that you can return an item that you borrowed at any branch and return it to any other branch. You can return items from building branches to the bookmobile and from the bookmobile to the building branches. And we reroute them internally the same way that we get our holds, the hold requests from branch to branch.
Good job.
Other questions?
Thank you, Marion.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to invite everybody, if you have the time, if you'd like to have a tour of the bookmobile space. The stacks downstairs, the area is more or less like the stack space as Scottsville, minus the public areas. And the bookmobile vehicle will be back parked at 3:30 if you'd like to tour that as well. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Marion says that she would like to be everywhere and can't, but it seems to me that she is everywhere already. So.
How many people are?
Technology is great.
How many people, are you the lone person or is there someone who rides with you?
No, whoever is the specialist, and the driver and the reference and the YA and the children and you name it. One at a time.
Marion's training right now, so you might see two while she's been out training the newest specialist, but generally there's one person on there doing all those things, all the functions of a branch, so. There you go.
All right, I don't think we have any committee appointments or reports this month. So old business, last month we talked about voting on the Friends Family of Funds grant. Remember that the advisory board for the Friends Family of Funds met back a couple months ago and had that list. And in your handout is the list of suggested expenditures for fiscal year 25. And we had basically postponed voting on that last month in July, so we'll bring it up again in August. And remember that with the new sort of fiscal procedure, it's our job to say, yes, we approve of these. And David.
Just a very minor detail here is that while the overall proposed expenditure did not change, within the categories that are on the screen now, so that's on your handouts on page 5, there was a shift from the Rachel Poole Fund into the Celia Martin Fund, because the Rachel Poole Fund, the total expenditure that we were going to ask for there is greater than the income for last year, which is considered bad practice. Not bad practice, we would have to further justify it. The Rachel Poole Fund is for educational purposes, and it's what we have used for scholarships, both for library staff and for members of the public. So we split that, and some of that went into the Celia Martin Fund. The bottom line is no different. It's just coming from 2 different funds.
If not, could I have a motion to accept the suggested expenditures?
So moved.
Somebody want to read?
You can do it.
Oh. Potential motions.
No, I move.
I move, I'm sorry, I don't have my peekers on. I move the JMRL accept the Friends Family of Funds at the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation granted allocation of up to $114,100 and authorized expenditures of that funding for the support of library services.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Now, on to new business, and we can see it in the distance. It's about to be here, fiscal year 26 budget planning. Remember, we were going to talk a little bit about the possibility, not perhaps in this fiscal year, but in coming fiscal years, of reducing fines and fees, perhaps moving some things that were in the equipment budget into the operational budget, especially software licenses. And as that's kind of a little bit of pieces of minutia, but I want David to talk about the timeline from here on out, at least through the end of the year.
Sure. And I wanted to take this opportunity just to share some kind of points of emphasis for the things that the board has talked about, the things that library staff have looked at, and what's in our strategic planning as well. So what's going to happen, let's look at the board budget schedule actually, so that you all can see. Always available. The first kind of marker here doesn't involve board action, but it involves staff action. So it's in a few weeks on September 13th. Department and branch managers will submit personnel and operational budget requests. So these are items that they would like to see included in the fiscal year 26 budget. I will do an initial review of those, and then the personnel committee will meet in early October under our new chair. And usually they look at those requests and attempt to prioritize them. So the personnel committee is not looking for, can JMRL afford these? They're looking for which of these are the most important, should we be asking for these? And then they'll turn that over and give it to the budget committee. In October, I will present some of those requests to the library board and tell you what the personnel committee said, along with Brandy there. And then the budget committee will look at those in terms of the overall budget, including some of those things Tony talked about, some other issues I'm about to bring up. And they will make a recommendation, and then the board will vote on that recommendation on November 18th, which is a week earlier than usual. Remember, the board decided to try to avoid the Thanksgiving week this year, so we're a week ahead of where we normally are. So this is available on the board trustees page, and it just lines out what the timeline is. But basically, the order is library staff will work on things. The personnel committee will need to look at it. Once they make some decisions, the library staff will work those back into a proposed budget. With the budget committee, which will review it, they'll make a recommendation, then the full board will make a recommendation. After that, we'll submit those to our jurisdictional partners. Trustees and myself will meet with jurisdictional partners kind of early next year, and then we'll also meet with them as they need answers to questions throughout their budgeting process. So the points of emphasis that I wanted to mention, and the big thing, of course, is the comp project that we've been working on for over a year now. Pay scale work is ongoing. So in the spring this year, I shared peer library data on salaries with Charlottesville HR. Basically, the peer libraries were the ones that JMRL had self-identified, and so libraries that are associated with some of our jurisdictional partners' comps. So like what Charlottesville and Albemarle used to look at for their comp study, we looked at libraries from those same jurisdictions. And the city of Charlottesville's HR is working on a potential draft pay scale. So like this is what a new pay scale would look like. It may or may not be completed by the time the board needs to vote on a budget. So if it is completed, then there's going to be a lot of decision making by this board. Those two committees will be involved. They're going to have to figure out, like, I can't see a scenario in which a new pay scale comes. It's going to be affordable in 1 year. It's going to have to be like, how are we going to make this work over time? So if it's not ready, if it's not going to be ready in time, then the board likely is going to be looking at measures similar to last year's, where we tried to provide some stopgap increases to our existing staff. Primarily, what I would consider at that point in working on draft budgets for the board is moving up the pay scale, because we're also having problems in hiring folks at the current pay scale. So it's not just the current staff that we have and the retention there, it's getting people in at the starting salaries that we're offering. So we could potentially look at moving up the pay scale by a cost of living percentage to be determined to assist in hiring, retention, and to compensate our substitute employees who have not seen an increase in several years. Most branches use some form of substitutes who start at the bottom of the pay scale and stay at the bottom of the pay scale. They're not regular employees. They don't get the same benefits that employees do. They're meant to plug in gaps here and there, but we haven't raised that amount in several years since the last time the board made a 1% increase to the pay scale. And I think that was maybe 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And my thinking was that we would use that same COLA percentage to move up current staff. So if it was 5%, we would move the pay scale up 5% and hire people at the bottom of that. And then we could also give our own staff a 5% COLA, and then look at a raise on top of that for current staff. So it's a lot of moving pieces there, and depends on what we think is affordable for our jurisdictional partners. But that's kind of the approach that we'll take in the budgeting planning if we don't have a full new set of pay scale. What Charles is going to give us is a draft that this board will have to decide whether or not it's going to work. So that even if we get it in time, that might not work. I'm sorry. Just lost some amount. Mike, can you still hear us?
I can. It just takes me a second to find the unmute button, but yes, I heard it.
Thank you. We just had a little glitch here, but it looks okay. And the other
I think
thing.
I was solid though.
Okay. The other things that the staff will look at before bringing draft budgets to the budget committee are those operational software costs that Tony just mentioned. So likely we'll present a few different scenarios to the board, saying here's what it would look like if we took X amount of that from the equipment budget and moved it to the operational budget. Here's what the cost would be per jurisdiction, and then the board will make decisions on that. Another potential cost increase that has been on the horizon for a while was a change to the retirement plan that JMRL uses. It started 3 years ago. It was always a straight 8% contribution by the organization of salary into a 401 plan for staff. 3 years ago, that changed to 8% for new staff. If you've been here for 5 years, it becomes a 9% contribution. At 10 years, it becomes a 10% contribution. The last 3 years, that has been paid for by forfeiture funds from the retirement fund. So there has been money in the fund to pay for it. I believe that this year JMRL might need to account for that. I'm waiting to hear from Charlottesville whether or not that's going to be the case. Likely that'll be around $25,000 to $30,000 in new costs for retirement. Also, this year, I think we want to be proactive about rising healthcare costs. In years past, we have waited to get data from Charlottesville about what their healthcare costs are going to be. And invariably, there has been a change at some point, as they get new information. So I think our first base level budget should start with an increase, and then we can work our way back from that if we get data that says otherwise. So that's the 26 budget. While I've got you here, captive audience, there are a few current fiscal year things that I just want to get on your radar. The budget committee may need to discuss, and there might be recommendations that would be adjustments to this year's budget. One was potentially a new box truck, which was mentioned in the spring when the equipment budget went through. So once our business manager is back, he and I will look at scenarios and figure out what makes most sense and whether or not that needs to wait for next year or it's something we can do this year. And the other is that there are going to be some mid-year decisions to make about a change in federal law about exempt employees. Exempt means that employees are not eligible for overtime pay. And new federal laws are changing the rates of pay at which the cutoff line there is. JMRL is good for now, but in January, that's going up quite a bit to about $56,000 a year. If you make any less than that, you cannot be exempt. We'll have to make some decisions for this year in budgeting about whether or not we have enough to change those salaries for branch managers, the new branch managers that are below that amount, or if it's going to be, we're going to pay overtime and which one is going to be more expensive. So that's not necessarily 26 budgeting, but since we're talking about money and the budget committee, one vote.
Always good running. Always good running.
It's always budget season, Tony, is the bottom line.
All right, which brings us to the library director's report.
Oh. Well, here's some good news. It's kind of related a little bit. I'm very pleased, JMRL is very pleased to learn that last month, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, voted to expand federal E-rate funding to include mobile hotspots. So E-rate funding is federal money that's available to help with telecom costs. It used to be phone lines, now it's data lines, and you can get some networking material too there. For example, the device that's on the bookmobile that broadcasts that Wi-Fi is about 80% funded by federal E-rate funding. So now the hotspots that we circulate starting next year are going to be able to be reimbursed through that process, both the hardware and the data. We currently have 22 on the T-Mobile network and 13 on the Verizon network. This funding would allow JMRL to potentially purchase more and get up to 80% of the data costs paid for. I'm looking now to see if this is going to have a budgetary impact. Likely it's not going to be huge. It'll be hundreds, not thousands of dollars, but it will give us an opportunity to expand there if we want. I wanted to share a card that was sent jointly to the library board and to the Friends board from a JMRL employee that is the recipient of one of the scholarship funds that the CACF Friends Family of Funds gave out. Dear members of the JMRL Library and friends of the library boards, thank you so much for approving my scholarship for another year. I'm so grateful that your generosity has allowed me to continue my education. I look forward to incorporating more of what I learned in my current position as I pursue my goal of becoming a librarian. This is from Carrie Wood in Crozet, so I'm going to pass that around. This is part of the program for library employees to get a master's degree in library science. Three more things. Jennifer McAdam Miller's last day as JMRL's PR specialist was on Friday. I think I mentioned last month that was coming up. We're pleased to be welcoming Dylan Padilla to the team next week as JMRL's new PR specialist. So there's only a week without coverage there when Kristen's going to be pulling together the loose ends. Dylan comes to JMRL with a background in graphic design and roots in the area as a Charlottesville native. We're looking forward to working with him, and I'll bring him in front of the board to say hello once it's got. This year's JMRL All-Staff Training Day, formerly known as In-Service Day, is going to be on Monday, October 14th, and it's going to be at the Greene County Library and the upstairs Piedmont, Virginia Community College space, the Giuseppe Center that's above the library in the building there. So trustees are all invited to attend. I'll share an agenda when it's finalized. That's on Monday, October 14th. Finally, the Virginia Library Association's annual conference is going to be in Norfolk on October 16th through 18th. So trustees are members of the VLA just by being part of the JMRL system. We have an institutional membership and they're eligible to attend. The last day for registration is September 25th. So if any trustees are interested in attending the VLA conference, JMRL can reimburse for travel expenses accommodations, some portion of meals and registration. So if anybody would like to go, be in touch with me. As a reminder, Trustee Powers will be presenting a poster session on Wednesday, the 16th. So if you go, you get to see that. I'll be there as a co-presenter, but it's mostly, I'll be the Vanna White of the, Mike will be the song.
Which would be worth traveling to see, right?
And that is all that I have to report tonight.
Other announcements, other matters. Once, twice. Moving on to future agenda items. So we'll start the budget process, of course. We'll have a budget item. We have committee reports.
Yes, there's going to be a policy committee meeting. It's a bit off cycle because of travel. They're meeting on September 4th next week. So there'll be a report for that. That's the only one I'm aware of. At some point this fall, as time allows, we'll call the technology committee together, and then pretty soon it'll be personnel budget.
And continuing education of some kind we will have, yes.
It is on the annual calendar. You mentioned budget, that the board will set budget priorities next month.
That's right.
So I'll bring some of what you've been talking about in a coherent, hopefully coherent form, and you all can prioritize them.
Other questions, issues, items? All right, if not, I have my favorite motion to adjourn.
I so moved. I'm gonna miss you all.
I'm gonna miss you too. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, so next up is downstairs.
Correct. Thank you all. Thanks, Mike, for calling in.
Thanks, Mike.